For years, the corridors of Buckingham Palace held secrets too dangerous to speak aloud. But this time, the silence shattered. Multiple palace staff members stepped forward with allegations so explosive, so personal, that even senior royals were reportedly caught off guard. What they described wasn't just temper. It was humiliation, intimidation, fear. And when confronted, Prince Andrew's response stunned everyone watching. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The whispers had always been there, drifting quietly between footmen and secretaries, vanishing the moment a door opened or footsteps echoed too close. For years, aides learned to measure their words carefully, to brace themselves for sudden mood shifts, to anticipate storms before they arrived. What had once been dismissed as the sharp edges of royal discipline began to feel darker, more personal. Junior staff members, some barely into their 20s, described moments that lingered long after the conversations ended, voices raised not just in frustration but in fury, corrections delivered not in private council but in public reprimand. Behind the polished ceremonies and choreographed smiles, there were claims of doors closing harder than necessary and instructions delivered with cutting precision. Anonymous testimonies began surfacing quietly at first, fragments shared with confidants, then with reporters willing to listen. Words like belittled and terrified slipped into conversations that had once been bound by loyalty and fear. Some described sleepless nights before scheduled briefings. Others admitted transferring departments simply to escape the tension. The culture within certain corners of the royal household, they claimed, had grown heavy thick with anxiety, where silence was safer than honesty, and obedience was expected without question. The monarchy's machinery depends on discretion, but discretion, in this case, had become a shield for something far more unsettling. Inside palace offices, officials reportedly scrambled as the murmurs evolved into accusations. Meetings were held behind closed doors. Damage control strategies were whispered about in corridors usually reserved for state matters. The institution that prided itself on composure now faced something it could not choreograph. And then came Andrew's response, swift, unyielding, and startling in its cold clarity. He dismissed the allegations as exaggerations, painted himself as a leader misunderstood, and suggested that high standards were being twisted into cruelty. There was no pause for reflection, no acknowledgement of hurt, only denial, firm and unwavering. That reaction struck many as the true shock. Not the accusations themselves, but the absence of visible empathy. Staff members who had risked everything to speak out now found themselves publicly contradicted by a prince who refused to bend. The contrast was stark, vulnerable voices describing distress on one side, royal authority standing rigid on the other. Media outlets seized fragments of the story before any official confirmation could steady the narrative. Headlines hinted at a deeper fracture within the institution, speculation rising about why these staff members chose this moment, this precise, dangerous moment, to break years of silence. Some insiders suggest the timing was no accident. The monarchy has been navigating fragile ground, reshaping its public image under intense scrutiny. Perhaps the staff sensed that the world outside palace gates had changed, that power no longer guaranteed protection from consequence. Or perhaps the emotional weight had simply become unbearable. Whatever the reason, the silence that once protected everyone had dissolved, and as the voices of the staff grew stronger, as public curiosity sharpened into outrage, one truth became undeniable. This was no longer an internal matter quietly managed behind gilded doors. It was a reckoning unfolding in real time. But while the staff found their voices, Andrew was preparing something far more calculated, an unapologetic defense that would ignite a firestorm far beyond palace walls. When Prince Andrew finally broke his silence, many expected remorse or at least restraint. Instead, what they heard was cold, defiant, and to some, breathtakingly dismissive. In a statement that insiders describe as astonishingly heartless, Andrew reframed the accusations as weakness and disloyalty. It wasn't an apology. It was a counterattack, and the consequences of that tone would ripple through the monarchy in ways few anticipated. His words came carefully measured, but their impact was explosive. He rejected what he called false narratives, insisting that the portrayal of his leadership was distorted by exaggeration and resentment. There was no softness in his phrasing, no visible pause for empathy. Instead, he suggested that what some labelled bullying was nothing more than unwavering standards discipline mistaken for cruelty, authority misread as aggression. To his supporters, it sounded like strength. To his critics, it sounded like denial sharpened into dismissal. And to the staff who had spoken out, it felt like erasure. What struck observers most was not simply what he said, but what he did not say. There was no acknowledgement of emotional harm, no recognition that even the perception of fear within palace walls could signal a deeper fracture. He framed himself as the victim of disloyal subordinates who failed to meet expectations. In doing so, he drew a line in the sand not just between himself and the accusers, but between the monarchy's past and its uncertain future. Because in that moment, Andrew did more than defend his reputation. He challenged the very idea that power should answer to those beneath it. Senior royal aides were reportedly stunned by the tone. Behind closed doors, conversations grew tense. Advisors who had hoped for a measured response now faced a swelling storm. Some feared the statement would amplify the crisis rather than contain it. The monarchy, already navigating fragile public trust, could not afford to appear indifferent to workplace suffering. Yet Andrew's stance was unwavering. He did not bend. He did not soften. And that rigidity began to feel symbolic, an echo of an older royal culture colliding violently with modern accountability. Within hours, public backlash intensified. Commentators dissected every phrase, parsing the implications of his refusal to concede even a fraction of fault. Social platforms ignited with anger and disbelief. Supporters of the staff demanded transparency and reform. Critics accused Andrew of arrogance, of embodying a hierarchy that placed status above humanity. Even body language experts weighed in, analysing the steadiness of his expression, the firmness of his delivery, searching for cracks in the composure. But if there were doubts beneath the surface, they remained hidden. What the public saw was certainty unyielding and unapologetic. And that certainty widened a growing divide. The palace has long operated on tradition, loyalty, and discretion. But the world outside those gates has shifted. Expectations have changed. Leadership is no longer shielded from scrutiny by title alone. Andrew's defense, rooted in authority and hierarchy, collided head-on with a public increasingly unwilling to excuse perceived mistreatment. It was more than a scandal. It was a cultural confrontation. For some within the institution, the deeper fear was not just reputational damage. It was precedent. If a prince could dismiss allegations so openly, what message did that send to those who served? If there were no visible consequences, what did that imply about accountability at the highest levels? These questions lingered heavily, unspoken yet undeniable. But even as the backlash grew louder and palace corridors buzzed with unease, a more uncomfortable truth began to surface. This confrontation had not emerged from nowhere. The tension, insiders whispered, had roots stretching back years, perhaps decades. Andrew's steely words were not an isolated reaction. They were the culmination of a pattern long whispered about but rarely challenged. And as the dust from his statement settled, one realization became impossible to ignore. Beneath the defiance lay something older, something deeper, something that had been quietly building within the monarchy's inner chambers all along. Yet beneath Andrew's steely words lay something deeper, a history of tension that insiders claim had been building for decades. This wasn't the first time whispers followed Prince Andrew. For years, subtle signs hinted at a leadership style that some described as commanding, others as crushing. Behind closed doors, Former aides allegedly warned of emotional volatility, but in the rigid hierarchy of royal service, who dares challenge a prince? The answer, it seems, is no one until the cost of silence becomes unbearable. Long before the current allegations erupted into public view, there were stories told in hushed tones between trusted colleagues. Stories of meetings that turned sharp without warning, of instructions delivered with an intensity that left seasoned professionals unsettled. Some recalled moments when praise could shift abruptly into pointed criticism, leaving staff scrambling to correct mistakes they barely understood. These accounts never reached headlines. They lived quietly in memory, passed along carefully, always with the same caution: be careful who hears you. Over time, patterns began to form. Former staff members reportedly sought transfers to other royal households, citing vague reasons, new opportunities, different career paths, while privately admitting exhaustion. Aides who once dreamed of serving close to the center of royal power found themselves counting days, measuring moods, navigating tension like diplomats in their own workplace. It was never a single explosive incident that defined the culture, but rather a steady accumulation of moments that chipped away at confidence. In a palace built on tradition, endurance was often mistaken for loyalty. Internal complaints, according to insiders, rarely gained traction. The palace structure prizes discretion and unity above all. Raising concerns about a senior royal is not simply a professional risk. It can feel like a betrayal of the institution itself. Those who considered formal action were allegedly warned to think carefully about consequences. Careers in royal service are built over years, sometimes decades. To challenge authority within that system requires extraordinary courage and an acceptance that doors may quietly close forever. Complicating matters was a generational shift unfolding beneath the surface. Younger staff members entered royal service with different expectations about leadership and respect. They were raised in a culture that values emotional intelligence and workplace well-being. For them, raised voices and public reprimands were not signs of strong management, but indicators of dysfunction. The older guard, shaped by tradition and hierarchy, often saw such toughness as normal, even necessary. This divide widened silently, creating friction that no official statement could resolve. Behind the scenes, palace human resources reportedly faced mounting pressure. Conversations multiplied. Files thickened. Yet decisive action remained elusive. Senior royals were allegedly aware of murmurs, but intervention carried risks of its own. To confront a prince publicly would fracture family unity. To ignore the issue would erode trust among staff. The balance was delicate, and for years silence seemed safer than exposure. But silence extracts a price. Junior aides described an emotional toll that lingered long after shifts ended. Self-doubt crept in. Anxiety became routine. For some, the dream of serving the crown transformed into a burden carried in private. Each unaddressed complaint added weight to an already fragile structure. And as Andrew's recent defense reignited scrutiny, those buried memories resurfaced with renewed urgency. What now appears as a sudden scandal was, in truth, a slow-burning tension, building quietly beneath layers of ceremony and prestige. The question was never whether the whispers existed. It was whether they would finally be heard. And now that they were, the repercussions extended beyond Andrew himself. Because if he believed this storm would fade like so many before it, he failed to recognize a deeper shift unfolding within the very family that once shielded him. But if Andrew believed this storm would fade, he underestimated the shifting tides within his own family. Inside palace circles, one figure remained conspicuously quiet: Prince William. Yet insiders say his silence spoke volumes. As the future king, William has been reshaping the monarchy's image: modern, accountable, transparent. Andrew's alleged behavior and unapologetic defense threatened that fragile progress. And behind closed doors, a generational clash was reportedly unfolding. William has long understood that the survival of the crown depends not only on ceremony, but on credibility. In recent years, he has championed a slimmer, more focused monarchy, one that earns respect through service rather than demands it through status. The institution, under his watchful eye, is meant to feel accessible, grounded, aligned with the expectations of a changing public. But Andrew's defiant response to staff allegations struck at the heart of that vision. It resurrected an image William has worked carefully to move beyond, a palace insulated from consequence, unmoved by the voices of those beneath it. Reports of tension between uncle and nephew are not new, but insiders suggest this moment sharpened those fractures. William, shaped by decades of intense scrutiny, understands the cost of public perception. He knows that every statement, every gesture, ripples outward. Andrew's refusal to acknowledge harm risked undermining years of careful repositioning. It was not simply a personal misstep, it was a strategic liability. And in a monarchy navigating fragile trust, liabilities are dangerous. Yet William did not rush forward with public condemnation. He chose restraint. In royal protocol, silence can signal loyalty, but it can also signal distance. Observers noted subtle shifts, appearances that no longer overlapped, engagements that emphasized themes of accountability and leadership reform. Nothing overt, nothing explosive. But in the language of monarchy, subtlety carries weight. It was a reminder that the future of the crown may not mirror its past. Behind palace walls, advisors reportedly urged decisive action. The concern was not only moral, but reputational. Sponsors, charities, and international partners watch these developments closely. William's inner circle understands that the next generation of leadership cannot afford prolonged association with unresolved controversy. Pressure mounted quietly, not through public declarations, but through strategic conversations. What message does inaction send? What precedent does it establish? The symbolism of William's quiet stance became a subject of speculation. Some saw it as calculated patience, a refusal to escalate family conflict publicly while private solutions were explored. Others interpreted it as a silent rebuke, a signal that the monarchy he envisions leaves little room for unchecked authority. In a family where hierarchy has long dictated loyalty, this generational divergence felt profound. William represents a shift toward measured transparency. Andrew's defense embodied a rigid adherence to traditional power. As public debate intensified, so too did the internal pressure. Staff morale, public trust, and institutional stability hung in delicate balance. Every day without visible accountability risked eroding confidence in the monarchy's willingness to evolve. William, positioned as the future king, could not ignore that reality. His decisions in this moment would shape not only Andrew's fate, but the credibility of the crown he is destined to inherit. Yet even as William weighed loyalty against legacy, another figure stood at the center of the storm, torn between brotherly bond and sovereign duty. Because while William calculated his next move with strategic precision, King Charles faced an impossible balancing act. For King Charles, this was more than a public relations crisis, it was family. A brother under fire. A monarchy under scrutiny. The crown demands discipline. Blood demands loyalty. As outrage grew, Charles reportedly wrestled with a question that has haunted monarchs for centuries. Do you protect the institution, or the person who bears your name? Their bond stretches back to childhood, forged long before titles carried such crushing expectations. Charles has known Andrew not as a headline or controversy, but as a brother impulsive, proud, sometimes reckless, yet undeniably part of the same fragile lineage. That history complicates everything. Loyalty within royal bloodlines is not merely emotional, it is woven into identity. To distance himself publicly would be seen by some as betrayal. To defend him too openly would risk binding the monarchy to allegations that refuse to fade. Advisors reportedly warned of long-term consequences. Public trust, once weakened, is difficult to restore. The monarchy survives on perception as much as power. If the king appeared indifferent to claims of mistreatment within his own household, critics would seize upon it as evidence of institutional arrogance. Yet every decisive move against Andrew carried personal cost. Removing privileges, curtailing appearances, or signalling disciplinary action would echo beyond policy. It would fracture family unity in full public view. Behind palace gates, private meetings were said to unfold with quiet intensity. Conversations stretched late, weighing strategy against sentiment. Charles is no stranger to controversy. He has weathered decades of scrutiny himself. But this storm is different. It touches the moral fabric of the institution he now leads. Silence in public may preserve dignity, but internally, urgency grows. The king cannot afford to misstep. The crown rests on centuries of continuity, and any sign of instability ripples far beyond Britain's borders. The danger lies in perception. If Charles appears too protective, he risks being labelled complicit. If he moves too harshly, he risks deepening familial wounds that may never fully heal. Media speculation only heightens the tension. Commentators debate whether Andrew's roles will be further restricted, whether privileges will quietly disappear, whether this moment marks a permanent shift in status. Every rumour adds weight to the king's decision, and beneath the strategy lies something more human. Accountability within royalty is not abstract, it is deeply personal. To acknowledge wrongdoing within one's own family requires humility and resolve. It demands placing the survival of the institution above comfort, above affection. Charles understands that history will judge his response not only as a brother, but as a sovereign. The emotional burden of that realization is immense. As public outrage intensifies, Charles stands at the intersection of past and future. The monarchy he inherited was built on tradition, hierarchy, and discretion. The monarchy he must safeguard now faces demands for transparency and reform. Each choice carries symbolic power. Each hesitation invites scrutiny. The king's silence may be strategic, but it cannot remain indefinite. Because beyond titles and lineage, beyond palace protocols and family ties, this controversy has shifted focus toward those who once felt powerless within the system. Their voices grow louder, their stories gain traction, and as the royal household wrestles with its internal reckoning, it becomes clear that the most powerful voices in this storm were not royal, they were the staff who refused to retreat. Behind every headline was a human being, a trembling assistant, a shaken housekeeper, a young aide questioning their self-worth. While the world debated reputation, these individuals relived moments they say left lasting scars. Their stories, raw and deeply personal, transformed this scandal from palace drama into something far more unsettling, a reckoning about power, privilege, and accountability. For some, the memories are not loud, they are quiet and persistent. A sharp rebuke delivered in front of colleagues, a correction so cutting it lingered long after the meeting ended. They describe feeling small in moments when they were meant to feel proud. Royal service had once symbolized honor and achievement, yet behind the prestige, they carried a growing sense of dread. Each interaction became unpredictable. Each day carried the risk of humiliation disguised as discipline. One former aide spoke of standing frozen while their work was dissected with biting intensity. Words delivered not to guide, but to diminish. Another recalled the subtle shift in atmosphere whenever Andrew entered a room. How conversation tightened, how shoulders stiffened. It was not a single explosive event that defined their experiences. It was repetition, the steady erosion of confidence, the private tears after public criticism. Over time, anxiety became routine, an uninvited companion that followed them beyond palace walls. The emotional toll was not limited to bruised pride. Some described sleepless nights replaying conversations, wondering if they had somehow deserved the treatment. Others admitted questioning their competence entirely. In a system built on hierarchy, speaking up felt impossible. The fear was not just of losing a job, it was of being quietly blacklisted from an entire world they had worked tirelessly to enter. That fear kept many silent for years. But silence began to fracture when former staff found one another. Conversations that once happened in isolation evolved into shared stories. Support networks formed discreetly at first, messages exchanged, confidences revealed, reassurance offered that no one had imagined the tension. There was strength in that collective realization. The shame that once felt personal began to feel systemic. And with that shift came courage. Choosing to speak publicly was not impulsive. It was agonizing. Legal consultations reportedly unfolded quietly, weighing risks and protections. The stakes were immense. Challenging a royal figure is not simply a professional gamble. It is a confrontation with centuries of institutional power. Yet some concluded that remaining silent would mean accepting a narrative that denied their pain. They were not seeking spectacle. They were seeking acknowledgement. As their accounts reached the public, something unexpected happened. Empathy surged. Listeners who once viewed palace life as glamorous began to see its shadows. The conversation shifted from scandal to humanity. Commentators spoke less about titles and more about treatment. The moral weight of the controversy subtly tilted. It was no longer a debate about royal image. It was about basic dignity within a workplace. This groundswell of compassion intensified pressure on the monarchy. Every testimony added emotional gravity. Every shared memory made Andrew's defense feel more detached from the lived experiences described. The contrast became stark, vulnerable voices detailing distress on one side, unwavering denial on the other. That imbalance fueled outrage, but it also deepened the tragedy. Because beyond headlines and institutional strategy, real people were reliving moments they wished had never happened. And as sympathy swelled for the staff, Andrew's rigid stance only hardened. Once surrounded by privilege and deference, Andrew now found himself isolated. Invitations thinned. Appearances scrutinized. Conversations cooled. Sources describe a prince increasingly cut off not just from public favor, but from inner palace circles. Yet even in isolation, he refused to bend. The shift was subtle at first. Engagements that once bore his name quietly disappeared from official calendars. Public duties were reportedly reassigned, framed as routine adjustments, but interpreted by many as deliberate distancing. Events where Andrew might once have stood prominently were now marked by absence. The symbolism did not go unnoticed. In a monarchy where presence signals power, absence can speak even louder. Inside palace walls, advisors who once offered unwavering counsel began to step back. Support did not evaporate overnight, but it thinned. Strategic conversations turned cautious. Those closest to the center of royal planning understood the stakes. Proximity to controversy can stain even the most careful reputations. Andrew, once shielded by layers of institutional loyalty, now faced a quieter reality. Fewer defenders. Fewer allies willing to risk association. The machinery that once moved effortlessly around him seemed to slow. Media portrayal hardened with each passing day. Headlines sharpened. Commentators questioned not only his conduct, but his judgment in doubling down. The narrative shifted from accusation to consequence. Public patience wore thin. Every public appearance was dissected, every gesture interpreted. In the unforgiving spotlight, even neutrality felt like condemnation. Reports of an internal review began circulating, adding to the tension. Though details remained closely guarded, the implication was clear: the institution could not ignore the growing storm. For Andrew, this signaled something more than administrative procedure. It suggested that the shield of unquestioned authority might be cracking. Yet those familiar with his temperament insist he did not waver. Privately, he maintained his stance, convinced that yielding would validate what he considered distortions. In his mind, strength meant standing firm. Concession equaled defeat. Isolation, however, carries psychological weight. For a man accustomed to deference, to rooms shifting at his arrival, the gradual withdrawal of affirmation can feel like exile. Royal tradition magnifies exclusion. Within that hierarchy, being sidelined is not merely logistical, it is symbolic. It whispers that influence is waning, that trust is conditional. The palace has long understood how to signal disapproval without spectacle. A missing invitation. A reassigned duty. A statement not issued. These gestures speak in code, and Andrew could not have missed their meaning. Still, he persisted in framing himself as misunderstood rather than responsible. That rigidity deepened the divide. Critics saw stubbornness where he saw resolve. Allies grew quieter. And within the royal family, tensions thickened, layered with unspoken calculations about legacy and survival. The more Andrew insisted on his innocence, the more the institution seemed to edge away. This period of isolation did not bring reflection in the way many had anticipated. Instead, it sharpened the confrontation between personal pride and institutional preservation. The monarchy was recalibrating, and Andrew stood at its edge, uncertain whether he would be drawn back into its center or left orbiting its margins. Yet even as internal distancing intensified, a larger force was gathering beyond palace gates. Because the true turning point would not come from Andrew, it would come from public pressure reaching critical mass. What began as whispers became a national debate. Petitions circulated. Commentators demanded action. The monarchy, already walking a tightrope in a modern world, faced a defining test. Would it protect a prince accused of cruelty, or stand with the unseen workers who keep its machinery running? The answer, insiders suggest, came in a move that stunned even seasoned royal watchers. The backlash did not simmer quietly, it surged. Social media transformed into a battleground of opinion, with hashtags multiplying and calls for accountability spreading across borders. What once felt like an internal palace matter now belonged to the public. Citizens questioned whether centuries-old privilege could continue to shield one of its own. The conversation was no longer confined to tabloids. It spilled into mainstream discourse, into living rooms, into political debates. Each new testimony reignited outrage. Each reappearance of Andrew's defiant words fanning the flames further. Political figures began weighing in carefully, their statements measured but unmistakable. Some spoke of workplace dignity. Others emphasized the importance of transparency within institutions funded, even symbolically, by public trust. Though few mentioned Andrew by name, the implication hung heavily in the air. The monarchy, long insulated from direct political critique, now felt the subtle pressure of national leadership signaling concern. Silence, once protective, began to look like complicity. Sponsors and charities associated with royal initiatives quietly re-evaluated their positions. Partnerships thrive on credibility. Any shadow cast by scandal threatens not only image but mission. Insiders whispered of uneasy conversations between palace officials and external stakeholders, assurances given, strategies drafted. The message was clear. Reputational risk had escalated beyond internal discomfort. It now carried tangible consequences. Emergency meetings reportedly unfolded within palace walls, urgency replacing measured protocol. Advisors, legal experts, and communication strategists gathered with one central question: how to stabilize the institution without igniting further division. Every option carried risk. A strong rebuke might fracture the family. A muted response might alienate the public. The monarchy stood at a crossroads, its next move poised to define its moral compass. Then came the announcement. Framed as reform, it promised internal reviews, strengthened workplace policies, clearer channels for staff grievances. On paper, it read as progress. To supporters of the staff, it was a sign that their voices had pierced the institution's armor. To skeptics, It felt like damage control. But beneath the formal language lay a deeper signal. Change was no longer optional. It was inevitable. Speculation intensified about whether Andrew's titles or roles would be further restricted. Commentators dissected royal protocol, debating what symbolic gestures might follow. Would certain honours quietly vanish? Would public duties be permanently reassigned? In monarchy, symbolism carries immense weight. A title withheld, an event uninvited, a portrait relocated, each speaks volumes without a single word uttered. Andrew's reaction to this institutional distancing reportedly remained resolute. Those close to him suggest he viewed the reforms as an overreaction to what he still considered exaggerated claims. Rather than retreat, he held firm to his narrative of misunderstood leadership. Yet the space around him continued to shrink. Influence diminished. Invitations faded. The monarchy, once his shield, appeared increasingly focused on preservation rather than protection. This moment marked a turning point not only for Andrew, but for the crown itself. Public outrage had reached critical mass. The palace responded not with explosive confrontation, but with calculated recalibration. It was a balancing act under immense scrutiny, a demonstration of survival instinct honed over centuries. Yet even as reforms were announced and symbolic distancing unfolded, the deeper question refused to disappear. Because accountability is not measured solely in policy changes or reassigned duties. It is measured in acknowledgement, in empathy, in a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. And as the palace attempted to steady the storm, many wondered whether the heart of the matter had truly been addressed. Yet, even as the palace attempted damage control, one haunting question lingered. In the end, this was never just about Prince Andrew. It was about power unchecked, tradition unchallenged, and a monarchy confronting the modern demand for transparency. Whether Andrew ever truly acknowledges the pain described by staff remains uncertain, but the damage to reputation, trust, and legacy may already be written into royal history. What unfolded within palace walls has rippled far beyond them. The long-term implications are not confined to one prince's standing, they touch the credibility of the institution itself. For generations, the monarchy has relied on mystique and continuity, on the quiet assumption that its authority would endure regardless of internal turbulence. But this moment has tested that assumption. Public trust, once shaken, does not easily return, and when questions of dignity and fairness enter the conversation, they linger. Leadership in the modern era demands more than ceremony. It demands empathy, accountability, and visible responsibility. The expectation is no longer that power remains unquestioned, it is that power answers for itself. In that sense, this controversy marks a turning point. The crown is being measured not by tradition alone, but by its willingness to evolve. Every response, every reform, every symbolic gesture carries weight far beyond its immediate impact. For Prince William, this reckoning may shape the monarchy he ultimately inherits. His vision of a streamlined, service-oriented institution will likely face continued pressure to prove itself. Staff protections, clearer grievance channels, and transparent oversight are no longer optional luxuries. They are safeguards against future fractures. The next generation of leadership cannot afford ambiguity when it comes to workplace culture. If this chapter leaves any lasting reform, it may be in the strengthening of those systems. Andrew's legacy, however, stands altered. Once defined by rank and privilege, it is now inseparable from controversy and confrontation. Regardless of his personal convictions, history will frame this period as a defining moment. Some will remember his refusal to yield as resolve. Others will see it as rigidity that deepened wounds. Legacies are not shaped by titles alone, they are shaped by responses to crisis. And in this case, the response became the story. The monarchy's survival has always depended on adaptation. It has weathered wars, abdications, scandals, and generational shifts. Each era forces a recalibration. This moment is no different. The difference lies in speed. In a world of instant communication and relentless scrutiny, silence cannot contain discomfort the way it once did. The institution must confront not only allegations, but the cultural shift that made those allegations impossible to ignore. Yet beyond institutional strategy, there remains a quieter reality. Emotional scars do not vanish with policy announcements. For the staff who spoke out, the experience may linger long after headlines fade. Trust, once fractured, is slow to rebuild. And for a family already navigating complex public expectations, the strain of internal conflict leaves its mark. The Crown moves forward, as it always does, projecting steadiness. But beneath that composure lies a transformed landscape. Accountability has entered the conversation in a way that cannot be reversed. The world has changed, expectations have sharpened, and the House of Windsor stands at a crossroads between preserving tradition and embracing reform. Because in the House of Windsor, silence once protected everything, but now, the truth refuses to be contained. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.